Hello, everyone. First off, I want to thank everyone who came to attend Grandpa's celebration. Whether you came from near or far, it really means a lot to our family, so we really appreciate it. All right, so over the 14 years of my life, Grandpa has always been there for me. Whether it was contributing in ways that I wasn't even aware of as a young child, it was the little things, like spending a night at their house or watching a basketball game, that meant the most in the long run. All the good he provided for our family meant magnitudes now that we look back at it, and it's what I remember most about him. But where Grandpa's impact is most felt was not in our family, but in the lives of others. He donated to every charity and foundation he felt that could make a difference in other people's lives. He affected the lives of hundreds of families who he didn't even know. Grandpa made families' lives better. He made a difference in small communities, colleges, and organizations. Yes, he did take a trip or two, but it was to experience the culture of a foreign place that I likely hadn't even heard of. So I end with this. A message to Grandpa that I wasn't able to give. Thank you for all that you have done for me, my family, and most importantly, the lives of others. Thank you.
That's a tough act to follow. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. The outpouring of support for our family has been incredible and overwhelming. And I want to keep the mood light, the stories joyful, the food and drinks plentiful, because that is what Frank would want. No one loved to party more than Frank. Holidays, birthdays, intimate get-togethers, chatting up strangers on cruise ships. Frank enjoyed people, especially his people, and you are here today. Frank was devoted to his family, and that's what I would like to touch upon in my tribute to Frank. He adored my mother. He carefully curated and cultivated our tight-knit, eccentric crew. Many of us not even blood related. Didn't matter, we were family. He worked very hard for our family. Just like other areas of his life, he put forth the utmost effort and intention. Frank was reliable, thoughtful, and encouraging. He would bring pie every week to my grandma's, Margaret's nursing home. Even after she passed away, he would go and bring pie to the ladies and caregivers. He always picked up my mom from the airport, but not just at curbside. He would go in, park the car, walk to baggage claim, and be waiting for her to be there. 3 years ago, he warmly welcomed my dad, Tom, and his special gal, Beverly, back to Southern California from Florida, into the family with an open and unselfish heart. But these expressions of love for his family didn't always come so easily. You see, the man I met in 1982 was very different from the one I kissed goodbye on December 1st. In the 1990s, Frank made a determined and concerted effort to be a better man, to live his best life, to be his best self. It required intense personal introspection and a ton of work to make the changes. He went back to school and sought therapy and giving unto others with kindness and compassion. It is this evolution that has my utmost respect. Frank, thank you for your unwavering love and loyalty to our family, to your friends, to your teammates, to your colleagues, to humanity. Your death is a huge loss to us all. But we promise to carry on your legacy, inspired by the example that you led. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Kirk, and I was a D.C. boy, and I grew up in Northern Virginia, and I went to school in a place called Falls Church. And along about the 7th grade, we had a new kid show up, and that kid was Frank Govern. And he was enormous as a kid, even back then. And so here comes this great big guy in, and not only is he obviously a great athlete, but he had some sense of humor. And he was a lot of fun. And like kids do at that age, we like to participate in pranks and practical jokes and all the schoolyard things that people get into. And Frank loved that too, but Frank had one slight problem. He was head and shoulders above everybody else, and he had nowhere to hide. So this poor guy picked up a lot of fouls all the way through grade school because they automatically could spot Frank trying to duck behind somebody, and there was nobody to duck behind. And then there was the laugh. So the nuns that taught us didn't even have to see it. They could hear the laugh, and they said, Frank Govern. So they knew Frank was up to something. And so he was a constant source of fun and entertainment, and he kept that light spirit all through his life. And he was just the same with me a few days before he died as he was when I knew him in grade school. And after grade school, we went to different high schools, and then he went to William and Mary, and I went to the University of Virginia. But we still stayed in touch, and we would see each other at Christmas and during the summers. And then after school, after college, we all roomed together, and we got a big house, an old house in Arlington, which we named the Vatican. Nothing could have been further from the truth there, but I won't go into all that. But there were 4 single guys living there. Let's see, there were 3 from William and Mary and me, and we had a wonderful time. And we still had a lot to learn. We thought we were pretty worldly, of course, and I remember one evening we had dates over, and it was in probably February, and it was getting a little cold, and I think we had forgotten to order the oil for the oil burner that month. So we had some logs in the fireplace, but they were burning down pretty quickly. So we remembered that there was a plank, a loose plank up in the attic. So we went up and pulled up the plank, brought it downstairs, and we both agreed that all we had to do was stick one end of this. It was about 18 feet long, and we just had to stick one end in the fire, and then as it burned, we would just keep feeding it in. But we didn't quite understand the physics of that. And, the next thing we knew, the place was full of smoke, and we were throwing water on the fire that was now coming out into the living room. And I don't know whatever happened to those dates. I don't think we ever saw them. That was just a typical night in the life of our youth. So having a friendship with Frank was amazing. To try to sum up his life in a brief speech is just impossible, because he had a huge life. And he was a huge person, as far physically as well as his personality. And that personality touched a lot of people around the world, as well as in Virginia and here in California. So he maintained a lot of friendships with his high school. So that's the kind of loyalty that Frank had. When you were a friend of Frank's, you were a friend for life. And I was privileged to be part of that. So I'm always going to miss him, but I always feel his presence. And I felt his presence since he left us. And I know he's enjoying this. And so I'm very honored to be able to come out and meet some of his friends out here and some of his family. And I'm just delighted to be able to share a few moments of what a fun person Frank was. So thank you so much.
Like the others, I've got 4 pages of notes. The Vatican, are you kidding me? It was a big animal house. Dear family, friends, Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bud Porter, and I'm here from Hampton, Virginia. And Frank Govern was one of my best friends. I met Frank Govern at the College of William Murray, where we were teammates on the football team. A little later on, we became fraternity brothers at the SAE house. That wasn't the Vatican either. I met Frank on the football field, but I was a running back and he was a lineman, and back in those days, we didn't associate with each other. But I was a couple of years ahead of Frank, and I left school before Frank, and Frank graduated in '64, and he disappeared from the face of the earth. Nobody heard from him. He never came back to the school. He never came to homecoming from 1964 until 1983. He had married Sharon. I got a feeling she had something to do with his return to William and Mary. I was standing in the hospitality house, which is a place where most of the kids meet across the street from our football stadium, waiting on some fraternity brothers who were going out to dinner. This great big hand comes across my shoulder, almost knocks me down, and this voice says, "I know your voice, but I can't remember your name." And I turn around and look, and it was Frank. And I said, "I'm Bud Porter." He said, "Oh my gosh, Bud." And we hugged and we laughed and we exchanged some pleasantries. And I asked Frank, I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, we don't have any plans." I said, "Come on." I invited Frank to go have dinner with me and some of the other brothers. That night, at that dinner, Frank Govern and I became fast friends. We found out that we had so much in common. We liked the same things. We enjoyed so many things together. We had a mutual respect for one another. It's hard to see up here with the glare. Frank was easy to laugh. I could make Frank laugh real easy. And as others have attested, Frank's character, top of the line. Integrity, it's like he invented the word. But he was kind, and he was compassionate also. We started to visit one another. Frank invited me out to California a couple times a year, and Frank would come to Virginia 4 or 5 times a year. We had a football reunion every June. He would come. He would stay with me at my house. We would play golf and do all these things together. When I visited California, I think Frank has taken me to every museum within 100 miles of Newport Coast. And we played golf every place there is to play here. He took me to UCI basketball games. He took me to UCI baseball games. I see a face in the crowd. The first person I ever met when I came here with Frank, he took me to my first UCI basketball game, and I met Big Al. Hi, Big Al. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you.
Big Al was one of Frank's friends, and after the game, we enjoyed some cold brew together. Frank indoctrinated me into the Eater Club. He bought me t-shirts about the Eaters. He appointed me head of the alumni chapter of the UCI Eaters on the East Coast. I think we consist of one. What a guy. The great thing about Frank that I really think is special is Frank always made me feel good. He always made me feel important. He always made me feel like I was a part of his life and that was important to him. Isn't that what good friends do? Frank sure did it. When Frank came to Virginia, two of his favorite places were the Kings Mill Golf Course and the Golden Horseshoe, which is at the Williamsburg Inn. We always had to play there. He loved it. He also loved the simple things. I live in Hampton. For all of you California people, Hampton is the oldest continuous English-speaking settlement in America. 1610, 3 years after Jamestown. Frank loved the waterfront of Hampton. He loved me to take him down there. He used to love to watch the scallop boats and the Chesapeake Bay blue crab boats come in loaded down. I had a client that was in the business, and I'd take Frank over, and Frank would watch him steam those Chesapeake Bay babies. And he loved it. He loved just hanging around that waterfront. He and Tony had a love affair when they were younger with the Hampton One design. It's a small sailboat invented in Hampton for the waters around the Chesapeake Bay where it could operate in 2 or 3 inches of water. Frank and Tony had one. He had a lot of good memories, and I took him to the places in Hampton where he could relive those memories. I took him to the Newport News shipyard. He loved to stand in front of the shipyard. It's the only shipyard in America that builds aircraft carriers. And when you stand in the street and look at the size of those aircraft carriers, it's monstrous. Frank loved the simple things like that. My true passion is the Boys and Girls Clubs. I'm very involved with the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Virginia Peninsula. I'm a 37-year corporate board member. Frank would come visit me, and I also carried him to some of my Boys and Girls Clubs. I wanted to see some of the kids and to see what we do. And I showed Frank how we make a difference in their lives and how we get them off the streets. And they don't become drug dealers or prostitutes. They become tax-paying citizens. Frank bought into that. He accepted that. Immediately, he wanted to help me in my club. And he's done that in many different ways. I have a board, a corporate board. I serve on with 62 members. These people are amazed that a man in California can financially support a Boys and Girls Clubs in Virginia. Unusual, different, what do friends do? That's what friends do. He knew it was important to me. So he helped me in that respect. I got a phone call. Frank says, Bud, I'd like to send 25 of your Boys and Girls Club kids to a Williamsburg basketball game. I said, oh, Frank, that's great. He said, pick 4 games on the schedule. I'm going to send you some money, 100 kids, 4 different games. Each gets a free ticket, and I'm going to give you a $5 bill for every child. Now, $5 may not sound like much to you, but to a kid who lives in poverty with no parents, that's a big deal. And they look at me and I said, yeah, Mr. Governor gave you this. And you can do anything you want to with it. He said so. That's what friends do. Frank was my friend. He was a wonderful friend. I want to close by saying this. In my era of the 50s and the 60s, men didn't tell another man they loved them. Back in my day, most of our fathers never told us they loved us because that's the way they were raised. I loved Frank Governor. I loved him like the big brother I never had. Charles Schultz, the creator of Peanuts, had a cartoon with Snoopy flapping around his doghouse. And he said, best friends are those who say nice things about you when you're not there. I have a more cruder interpretation. Best friends care about you and love you in spite of your warts. Frank Govern was my best friend. A wonderful, wonderful man. I was so blessed to have him in my life. And from this day forward, I'm going to live my life in honor of Frank. And I'm going to do the type of things that I think Frank would be proud of me doing. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I sure would have loved to have been on that football team with Frank. And I'm here today to honor the man I knew as Coach Govern. Probably not a lot of you called him Coach Govern, but that's what he came to be known to me. I was the first time head coach when I got here. And I think the first practice I showed up for, Frank was there, waiting to see what I had. I felt a little pressure in that until I learned he was from Virginia, and the trust began to build on day one. But I called him Coach Govern most recently because of the respect that goes for me with that title. Not that I demand, but that I feel. Good thing these are here. That I feel for the coaches that I had. And I think Frank connected with that. And I connected with him because of it. I called him Coach Govern because he had an impact on me. The way many of my coaches did, and the way that I hope to have on my players. And I know Coach Govern had that impact on our program. And through our program, on our players, and hopefully also on this community. You see, he's like a glue guy. If you watch games on TV, you hear that sometimes. As a coach, he was like a glue guy. Glue guys connect people, or connect things, and strengthen them. That's where the name comes from. And that's what Frank was doing in the UCI men's basketball program, even before I got here, long before I got here. As evidenced by former players we stayed in contact with, and even their families, some of whom are here today. It didn't take me long to figure out that he was having the impact he had that was positive. I wasn't thinking that much about it as a young coach, but I could see it, I could feel it. And I made the smart decision, luckily, someone probably talked me into it, to allow Coach Govern to have just incredible access to our team. He came to practice almost on a regular basis. I allowed him in film sessions, which is the equivalent of being in the locker room. He traveled on a team bus sometimes. This was before Jack was old enough to be on his own teams. He traveled on road trips with us. And that unusual access that I allowed him made him a part of us. And also led to some funny stories. See, Coach Govern didn't hear everything my players did. My players all knew that in the locker room, if the cell phone went off in the NBA, the rule was that was a $1,000 fine. Well, Coach Govern didn't have the same attention to his cell phone that my players did. And one day during a rather dramatic video session after a loss, someone's phone rang. It was his. And immediately I said, that's $1,000. And like the stand-up guy that he is, that we all know him to be, he showed up the next day at practice with a check for $1,000. Which didn't begin to represent his generosity. Frank did what he said he was going to do. And I admired that, and I began to say that to my team. He was more generous with his time and his intent with all of these young men, people that he hoped to have an impact on, much the way others had had an impact on him. And the number of players that he's touched in the 10 years I've been in Irvine is not a number I can even imagine. I think probably everybody on my team somehow has been touched. Every player, every staff member, somehow they've all been touched by Coach Govern. As an example, he would cut out newspaper articles. And I thought that was great for my young players. They probably didn't have very many people cutting out newspaper articles for them. But he'd send emails and links, try to find ways to inspire guys on my team, to serve them, much the way he served our country. And later in his life, he served the community of Long Beach as an elementary school teacher. He searched for opportunities for impact, and in doing that was just such an inspiration and role model to these young men and to me. He even drew on his educational background to offer our 7'6" center. He wanted to be Mamadou's tutor. I thought that might even be a job that was too difficult for Frank to overcome. But Frank wanted that challenge and stayed in contact with Mamadou all the way up until the last couple of weeks of his life. Frank especially loved the guys on our team in our program with stories. And I've come to say the same thing as I recruit. I love guys with stories, with something to prove, with something different. The underdogs were the guys who were Frank's favorites, the underdog guys on my team, which was great for the way that he supported them, because often those are not the guys who get the most support on a daily basis from their teammates or coaches. But he loved their drive and their resilience. It seems like every time we had a conversation in the season, he would remind me, Frank would, Coach Govern would remind me, made a point to remind me of the best qualities of my worst players, which was great, because that enabled us to have a strong bond within our locker room that he helped in his own way create and strengthen. And I appreciated that so much, except for sometimes during practice, when we'd be working on defense. On a tough practice, after a hard game maybe, and I'd take my best guys, and we'd be working on defense, and all the underdog walk-on guys would be on the other team playing offense, and when they would score, and I'd be mad at the starters, Frank would be on the sideline cheering for the offense. He'd say, whoa! Every player in our programs heard that, and Frank and I had to have a discussion about that a time or two, because he was cheering for the wrong team, I thought, in our practices. But his enthusiasm and spirit, it couldn't stop him. And that was a great thing for him and for our group. It's something that I truly appreciate our players being exposed to. And I'm most grateful, maybe, because I knew Frank in the last 10 years of his life. I know what great 10 years those have been. But the very end of Frank's life is something that I'm really, truly grateful to have witnessed myself and for my players to all have seen. Because of his toughness, Frank's toughness, physical toughness, mental toughness, emotional toughness. For our team, Frank had an impact like Jim Valvano, Jimmy V, which many of you may remember if you're basketball fans. All of my players do, because we continue to honor Jimmy V to this day. Just like Jimmy V said, Frank didn't give up. He never gave up. And it was an honor to see that for me and for all of the young men and others in our program. And the thing that makes me happiest about our program, about our team, about what I get to do, is the connection that our players and our coaches, past and current, continue to feel for it. And I also feel happy about the connection that our program helps to build in this community. And Frank's an amazing part of that. That's why he's Coach Governor to me. Frank is an amazing part of that connectivity. And I'm just grateful to be asked to speak today. I'm grateful to have been Frank's close friend. And I'm grateful to be friends of all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing powerfully. I believe Sharon showed me a video clip of when players gathered with Frank in those final moments, and what an amazing tribute that was to the relationship between your team and Frank. You know, today we've listened to many stories, and we've seen many pictures of what Frank was like. From his early childhood days, to his college days, to even recent days when he did amazing things. You know, a sociologist by the name of Tony Campolo surveyed 300 people who were 80 years of age and over. And he asked them this question: if you could live life over again, what would you do? The third most popular answer was, I'd take time to smell the roses more. I'd stop and reflect more. I wouldn't be in such a hurry with life. I would pause more. The second most popular answer was, you know what? I'd take more risks. I wouldn't play it so safe. I would actually take a chance. But the number one most popular response was this: I would leave a legacy beyond my time and years on this earth. And one of the most resounding and most profound things about Frank Govern's life was that he left a legacy. A legacy that will live on. Yes, in his grandson Jack. Yes, in his friends and his family. Yes, in all of those who have intersected in his life in so many different ways. He will leave a legacy. I believe the most challenging thing for us is to leave a legacy. The Apostle Paul, on one of these occasions, when he was imprisoned and challenged by life and the enormity of what was before him, sitting in a jail cell, with a jail chain no more than a meter separating him from his jailer, said something that is most profound. For me to live is Christ. For me to die is gain. See, friends, we can live life in a way where eternal benefits live on and on. I believe Frank is the epitome of that. He left a legacy that's going on and on and on. An eternal legacy. See, Jesus says this on more than one occasion. He said, in my Father's house are many rooms. If it weren't so, I would have told you so. But He prepared a place for all of us. Because what we do on this earth is only temporary. For how we live has the potential of eternal reward. I want to live that way. You want to live that way, right? And I believe that's the challenge of Frank Govern. In the Salvation Army, we have this incredible terminology. When someone leaves this earth to the next phase, we say they are promoted to glory. See, Frank, his life hasn't ended. It actually has extended. He lives now, and someone already made reference to it. He's looking down upon us and he goes, stop crying. I'm just about to enjoy the party. And today it is a party. It's a party that will live on for eternity. So Frank Govern, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done. You've lived a life of fullness. You have served your master well. Enter now your eternal rest. Be promoted to glory. Enjoy the fruits of heaven. Celebrate with the angels as you watch over those you love and cherish. He's marching to a different rhythm and a different beat. But he's marching. To Sharon, to Kelly, to the family, to Pat, our prayers and our thoughts are with you as you grieve, as you say goodbye to a love of your life. Our prayer is that God, the Father, will be close to you in this time. Bless you as we celebrate and continue to celebrate Frank's life.